also want to thank the sponsors. I'm going to make a confession right off the bat. I'm really nervous, and I'll tell you why. I'm nervous because I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to get through this. So let me compose myself a little bit. Those pictures really threw me off. Maybe some of you know my background. I know you do. I'm so excited to have these people sitting in the dais with me, and all of you in the audience and those viewing across the country, because now we are shining a light on this, where people can see their children are losing not only their dignity and their hope and their freedom, but in some cases, they've lost their life. So for those of you who don't know, so I'm an old cop. People think that when they look at me, I've been in Congress for 40 years. But I've only been here 10. I was a cop for 33 years, and 19 years was, part of that was a 19-year effort with a great team of people to track down a killer who murdered probably 70 to 80 young girls, pled guilty to 49. We closed 51 cases. Closed 51 cases. It's the most prolific serial killer in the United States. But you don't hear much about him, and I'm not going to mention his name. When I was working this case, when I started, I was 31 years old. I was 6'8", 240 pounds, and I had dark brown hair. This is what happens. But what I remember about that case is meeting the families and working with the families, and they still call me today. One of the mothers lost a dear friend a few weeks ago, and she called me on the phone to cry and just, you know, I was there to try and console her. I just, in the last few weeks, got 2 emails from young women who were working on the street back in the early 80s. One happened to have the opportunity last week to meet my grandson at a church event, and she's now a counselor for young women. And she met Caleb, and she started to cry and hug Caleb because she said he looked like me. So I don't know if that's a good thing. She said, "Oh, you know, you poor kid, you look like your grandfather," or. But she felt that connection, and she added in her email. She said, "You know, I cried because I remember he cared." And I know all of you care. My focus in Congress has been, well, let me just say this first. I was a runaway. I grew up in a family of domestic violence. And so I know that kind of part of the story, why people leave their homes. That's only one part of the story, domestic violence, but the physical abuse, the emotional abuse, the sexual abuse, the kids being driven out of their homes looking for, as I think Debbie said, looking for love, or Karen may have said that, looking for love, and they find it in the wrong places on the street, and then not knowing really what love is, and getting trapped in that life and snatched away from people who truly do love them. We have a responsibility, and especially focusing on those kids who are runaways and end up in foster care. And we just passed a bill. This is the one bill that passed last year that came out of my committee, subcommittee on human resources, that focuses on foster kids Because if you were driving down the street and you saw 10 young children standing on a street corner, 6 out of 10 of those would be foster kids in our system, in our states across this country, that we have responsibility to take care of, and we're not. We're not. And I've talked to those kids on the street. You know, it's you talk to a young girl one week, and the next week I'm recovering her body. You give her a warning, get off the street. There's people out here who will hurt you or take your life. Once they're in the life, it's hard to get them out. You all know that. I mean, all of you listening know and working in the field. The bill that we passed tries to focus on, well, it does focus on those foster kids to try to get them out of the street into permanent homes, not bouncing from foster care home to, from foster home to foster home, from school district to school district to school district, but to get them in a permanent, loving home. Incentivizes adoption. And it helps create an atmosphere for kids who are in foster care to have a normal childhood where they can participate in events after school, where they can feel a part of the school community. It's hard to believe that the way the law was previously, the laws were across the state, and in some states the kids couldn't participate in athletic activities. They didn't have a way home. They could only take a ride with the foster parents, so the foster parents couldn't pick them up. They can't get a ride with the coach or with the music teacher or whomever, another parent, so they couldn't participate. The law also collects data and trying to find those services that really impact foster kids' lives, to get them out of that lifestyle. And when we asked T and others to testify, they told their stories, and in my subcommittee hearings, what we tried to focus on were those young girls and young women who have been through the system, who knew what services worked and what services did not work. It's great to hear from all the, the directors of the social and health services across the country and all the caseworkers. That's valuable information. But the most valuable information comes from the people who lived it. And that's what our legislation was based on. And I think it's a great start, and I know that Karen and Ted and Carolyn and Debbie and others are working on additional legislation, and we need to continue this battle. Our goal, I was on the Domestic Violence Council in King County as the sheriff there, and the goal was to end domestic violence, not to reduce it, to end it. And our goal in human trafficking is not to reduce human trafficking, but it's to end it, period. And I couldn't agree more with what's been said, and the judge, I think, said it best, though, and I'm right in line with that, is the crooks need to go to jail. These guys are raping young girls. They need to go to jail, and they need to go to jail for a long time. We need to send a strong message. We will not be tolerating people that take advantage of these young women and young girls, and we won't tolerate the pimps either. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here today and share my story. I got a little emotional when Carolyn showed the pictures. I wrote a book also that goes to a charity called the Pediatric Interim Care Center in Kent. It's called Chasing the Devil, and it's a story about tracking down this killer. A little bit about my life, but all the money goes to help drug-addicted babies. And one of the things that I've always kept are the photos of all the dead bodies, the dead young women that I collected over those years. And I can close my eyes and picture those remains, each and every one of them, their names and the sites and their families. That's our motivation, ladies and gentlemen. Remember the faces of the young women that Carolyn showed you, and the faces of those young women that have died. I thank you for having me.